Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome back to the live drawing live stream from the Stillfleet Studio. As usual, here with Ethan. Ethan, that's where
Hello.
you say things. Cool.
Hi. It's me.
It's a you. And we also are joined by a special guest today, Taylor Z. Taylor, hey, do you want to introduce yourself? Say hello to the internet.
Hello, Internet. I'm Taylor. I sometimes hang out on the Discord server, and sometimes I draw in the Discord server. So you might have seen some drawings in there.
Awesome. Yeah, and we really like your drawings, and so we really appreciate you making time to just kind of chill and draw some stuff with Ethan today and talk about. I mean, ideally, I guess the idea is these are kind of tips and advice, but also it's just kind of a chill, you know, co-working sesh. So, with that, we're back in Magma, so we can see what both of you are drawing in theory, I think.
Mhm.
Um, is that working for y'all, first of all?
Can you yeah, Taylor, can you draw a thing on the thing?
Yeah, give me just a second. It's giving me login issues
Oh,
at the
sure.
moment. So please just draw and start, and I'll join in just
Sure.
a sec.
Excellent. So we'll be joined by more drawers. So we're gonna
Drawer.
be in Magma, and we're gonna be working on something macabre and spooky because it is spooky season, but also because it's Dance Macabre season, which
It's
is
true.
the spookiest time of the year when we release a whole new game, a whole new sort of product line and world that is all about a medieval, basically zombie apocalypse. So Ethan, I know you're doing a lot of art for that and some writing. We were just talking about some of that work. So,
Yeah.
what do you think you're going to be sketching and doodling and bringing to life today in the macabre tradition?
That's a really interesting question. It's funny because when it comes to spooky stuff, it's so, I guess, like second nature for me. There's a particular kind of like, for lack of a better word, ooky kind of spooky. My sort of sweet spot is traditionally been an Adams Family esque kind of like spook, where it's like, oh, it's kind of spooky with a hint of sadism, but it's mostly about like the vibes and the imagery. I have very recently, I mean, with Dance Macabre seemed like a really good opportunity. I haven't drawn too much horror stuff, and I'm starting to have an interest in it. I don't know if it's simply because I'm finally old enough that I can watch a horror movie without hiding under the sheets, or if it's simply because times are dark and my brain needs something to chew on. Um, but like it's a whole new kind of ball game of like I always think about like what are the differences between vibes? Like I would say 90% of like art direction is vibes based. It's sort of like what compositions and what like styles and mark making and all that kind of stuff really like can sell the specific kind of like world or theme or tone that you're trying to go to. So like a lot of the conversations about that being like, outside of like it has to look like this and it has to be these places and these people have to be doing these things. It's sort of like, well, who are the illustrators from history or the artists from history who have like already kind of nailed something adjacent to it or like have a sort of like wellspring of ideas that could be in this sort of space. And then a lot of it is sort of like how thick a line or how much shadow or chiaroscuro or light and dark or like sad or happy like is going to really sell the kind of vibe that you're trying to go for like creating a world. And horror's got one that is like it is spooky, but like the language to use to describe it is way different. So that's been super interesting. Um, Switching over from like drawing a creepy pumpkin to like it's a pumpkin murderer who has got a thing in his hands, or like you are trapped in an infinite wellspring of horrors or sorrow with the pumpkin demon. Sort of
Yeah.
different vibes, sort of different vibes.
Well, that's Cronenbergian, right? Because all of that's kind of the through line besides, leftist politics and just high quality. We talked about sort of different things we all agree on. Oh, we're seeing someone's login screen, so I don't know if we want
Is
to
Oh, that's
that
share
I,
that.
me, Taylor
it
Z?
just
No.
no, it just sort of like I think it's trying to advertise something, so I'm gonna just press the
Oh,
Here,
refresh
why don't
button.
you guys log in, and I'll
Oinker
reshare when
folks.
you're settled. I was just gonna say, the through line we decided, in addition to kind of lofty philosophical aims, which are meaningful and fun to talk about, but is Cronenbergian like body horror. So all the games have this
Yeah.
kind of idea of
yeah.
mutation and being other and alterity as a way to have some of those conversations about building community, respecting others, and just really weird futures, and like what you're always changing. Like you used to be a little guy, and now you're an adult, and that's already weird. So I think the natural extension into the Cronenbergian is, I think for all of us, something that is fun and generative when you're making games and telling stories. And I imagine, not being primarily an artist, a visual artist, but I imagine that's also generative when you're drawing bodies, right? As well, I could draw it normal style, or I could make it a spooky, ooky pumpkin, Ethan, as you said, or you could make it really terrifying, like a mutant who's like part gourd and has vine hands, but is actually trying to kill you, right? And that's truly the horrific space that our new game plays in. So it's not, it's not cute or cartoonish. It's like, no, these are zombies. They're trying to, rip your entrails out. To draw them, I don't know how that changes the game for you, Ethan, or Taylor, if you have thoughts on this as well. But I definitely hear you when you say that is a different version of spookiness.
I've been playtesting with Chris and many people in the server, Sarah and Jeff. And the thing that I find really delightful and evocative about Chris's descriptions of whatever terrible things are happening to us is how much it's not just like spooky yuki mutants, but it's like period tide spooky yuki mutants. Like my character just got the bubonic plague like 2 days ago, and it's no fun, but I'm very excited about it. And there's references to kind of homunculi, there's references to all sorts of like period sentiments about like, okay, what is the body, and what does it mean to have a body in a medieval period, and sort of like what does body horror look like if you are of the medieval mindset. And so it's really neat because when I think of body horror, I usually think of Cronenberg or science fiction, and so to put it in a historical time period is really kind of fun and awful. Awful in the good way, awful positive.
Yeah, it's so funny. I studied medieval literature and theological art in undergraduate, and I often talk about like I'm transfixed by it. Like because I'm not Christian, although there is much like Islamic art and Jewish art and Chinese art, like etc. Like there's a whole planet of stuff to discover. Because I was doing an English double major, I wound up focusing on that for the art studies that I was doing also, and it's so funny to me how medieval art really kind of skirts, like you can see where they're sort of like in it and they're in the weeds, and it's like it's a post-plague year and suddenly Saint Sebastian has got 1,000 errors and he's sickly and sallow, and it's about disease and death. And then sometimes where it's sort of like, oh, and then this guy got his head chopped off, but then a magical gem put his head back on again and he's fine. And it's like those are both grisly ideas. One of them is like clearly reacting to the world, and the other one is like a power fantasy. And I think I've always sort of been more comfortable, at least mentally, with that second one, and I'm trying to like understand the sort of thrills of unpleasantness of body horror. To your point, it's like, oh, it sucks, and that's awesome. That's a very different mindset.
So let's talk tech stuff real quick, just because we are still not on Magma, and also no one's really drawn anything. So I don't know if it's possible for one of you to invite the other to a new sesh where you can both be in, but it would be lovely if we could see sort of 2 side-by-side drawings, which was the original.
Are you able to use the link, Taylor? I put it in the chat.
When I go into the link, it sends me to a brand new session all by myself. So that's what I was trying to.
I do not know how to invite somebody to this because previously Tony has been the one establishing this. So I can figure that out. Let's see. It looks like there might be an icon. We're going to learn this together. Invite to draw. Copy link. There we go. There's a separate invite. You can't just go to the thing for whatever reason. Try that.
Okay, we'll try it. Thank you very much. Please continue talking about little guys. I studied in my art background, I studied pre-colonial Mesoamerican art, and so very different window. But
very different window.
I did have friends who studied medieval art, and mostly they just told me about their favorite tiny little guys, because there's a lot of tiny guys in medieval art. So I would love to learn more about what you learned, or like what kind of perspective you have on medieval art.
I think, the real challenge with body horror, and which is why I'm so appreciative of bringing it back to Dance Macabre, is, like, unfortunately, most of history, including a lot of now, like notions of the body in pain and the body like mutated or in quotes malformed, a very loaded term. It's very eugenical. It's like the idea of like a body that is wrong is bad, and so we are extolling comely beauty and strength and virtue, and the things that are not that are either there for comedic relief or to be ritually massacred. That's true across the board for lots of literature and art, all the way through the Renaissance. And finding sort of like humanistic differences like that, there are really interesting moments in like the stuff that sort of veers more towards like folktailiness, or like the Arthurian adventures before Mallory in medieval literature and art or depictions of it, where that's actually really complicated in a way that was always very surprising, where it's like, you know, a character encounters a giant, and the giant is the ugliest person they have ever seen in their life, and the giant is a lot smarter than them and wise and gentle, and it's like telling them an important plot point, and it's like, I am a man, how could I be anything else than a man? And you're just sort of like, oh shit, this must have really hit so hard in that time period. Like the audience was not expecting this under any circumstances. Or, you know, when there's a curse on a lady, and she, you know, turns ugly during the day but beautiful at night, and then, you know, the knight who rescues her, you know, she's like, which would you like? Because it's a romance, so it's like, would you like her to be beautiful at night or during the day for social values? And he's like, well, it's up to her, like, it's not my choice. And then the curse is lifted. So it's like stuff like that where you're like, this was written 800 years ago and sometimes is more progressive than the things that you'll see in like a mainstream TTRPG or like television. So like stuff like that was always super surprising to me. For me, I think like body horror stuff is I think it's been so complicated for me because I'm always like really hyper aware of the kinds of like ways that it can be socially awful. And as somebody who had suffered chronic pain a lot of his life, I'm like, boy, if that, you know, bodies kind of suck. But now I'm sort of understanding, I think, the psychology of like, oh, I kind of want to see that depicted more like visually outwardly. Like I want to see it.
Ethan, so sorry to interrupt, but we still don't have Taylor, so I'm wondering if you can check the permissions.
Yeah,
and
let me check. They should be.
Sure that, let's
I'm
get
also,
this part.
If it gets to be too tricky, I'm also happy to just ask you about your drawing process, and we can just talk about your drawing process.
Sure.
So
so the link that I sent was the drawing invite link.
Yes.
I need to, so it says I need to offer permissions. I do not know how to do that because I thought it would just
just be open access.
Right.
Says,
edit profile, refer a friend, go to website, account and billing. I don't know. I don't really know the interface.
Let's just talk about your art, and
let me try one more time sending you an email. What is I guess just I don't know,
just
paste
put
your
it
email in the chat and then I will add it because I don't know what else to do at this point.
Yeah, so as we try to do non-medieval things here, we are talking about medieval art, and I think, Taylor, you brought up something interesting, which is you studied Mesoamerican art, and we have in the game the idea that, you know, it's a zombie apocalypse that happens everywhere the same. It's not just happening in Europe and Western Asia. It's just that, you know, a lot of fantasies derive from essentially European, you know, Western fantasy comes from this kind of complex of sort of like Welsh and French, largely like myths, but obviously has a lot to do with the Crusades and these other sort of historical factors. And as Ethan is saying, there's depictions of alterity that are very different and like not racist in the modern way, but like weird in their own way. And so that's definitely something, you know, that drove us to like set the game in Constantinople at this kind of crossroads and not have it be so focused on Europe. But in the rule book, it's definitely a game set in the quote unquote old world, you know, so sort of the map is centered on Constantinople. And we have sort of, you know, Ethan's writing about Venice. I'm writing a follow-on adventure book that's, you know, Paris, or underneath Paris. And one of the things we did with the guide to the abandoned world, which is the companion you get along with the main book, is ask people to write chapters not set in Europe. So we have, you know, Sukhothai, the city-state that in real life was soon to be sacked by Ayutthaya, which is the predecessor to Bangkok, but, you know, basically the first sort of Thai state. And we have, you know, the Japanese government, the Muromachi government, which had just taken power, so trying to sort of defeat their rivals and unify Japan while zombie apocalypse is happening. And then we also have our friend who is Didene and is writing about sort of basically Vancouver, Haida Gwaii, that area, the Pacific Northwest, and what's happening with essentially people who are in a very different area in terms of geography, population density, production methods, but thinking through the same thing. Okay, the dead come back to life and try to kill you, and they're mutant zombies. So what do we do? And sort of how is that interpreted culturally? Is it good, bad, whatever, right? And so I think it's interesting as we've sort of had to ask and answer these questions as a team. And I don't know exactly how that affects the art because, the ask is some level of realism. Like it has to look kind of like the things we're describing. But I don't know, as artists, how do you go about sort of trying to pay homage to, and you're not, basically we're not trying to offend anybody, right? We're trying to have a fun book that's very widely usable by lots of people and doesn't feel too limited by geography. But at the same time, each of the geographic peculiarities, but including the art history there is interesting, right? It's worth kind of spending time on. So I don't know if you all have thoughts on that. And really, Taylor, this is a really question for you about studying different traditions that aren't necessarily your own. Maybe they are. But how do you kind of go about that, and how does that inform your art today when you sit down to draw?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. The reason I studied what I studied was because there were a lot of kind of academic experts in my part of the US in Colorado who study that. So they come up because we have the largest collection in the United States outside of Mexico for a lot of those things here in Denver. And so a lot of people end up coming here as academics to do their research, right? So it ended up being a really interesting topic. But ultimately, as much as I love and appreciate it, and I do draw consciously from some of the symbolism and how that symbolism is sort of palimpsested through modern culture, visually, I think the kind of art I make is very different because I tend to veer, I think, more towards different styles. But I do think that it does give you a new perspective on concepts of color, of abstraction, of how people tell their stories, of what symbols mean within different cultures. And so I would say in this case, like with this particular topic, as much as I loved learning about it, I don't think that that is what I explore in my art. I think it's more something that I'm grateful that I got to learn about, really. So, but does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Sure,
don't
yeah.
know.
I mean, I think there's things that inform us as artists, but don't they're not the thing we
Yeah,
do, right? Like
I don't think
I've
it's a direct correlation. I'm sure subconsciously it's affected my art, but I
right.
don't think I've gone
Oh
out
yeah.
trying to emulate it. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't
Well,
spend the
everything
day
goes
to
in the
day.
pot.
Oh,
Everything goes
sure.
in the
Yeah.
pot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Taylor, any luck with Magma with logging in
Not
here?
yet. No. I'm looking
Did
for the
you?
email.
Okay.
Uh, cool.
So yeah, Ethan, do you want to say a little about what you're drawing as we look at this sort of
Yeah,
shape?
it's sort of funny in trying to like, uh, you know, my sibling and I have a joke that it can be like when we set out to do something horrifying, it winds up being cute, and when we try and do something cute, it's just like it's just horrifying.
Yeah.
Um, I accidentally stumbled into body horror during our morbid anatomy and observatory gallery days by doing all of these like fictional organs and like fictional body systems, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's a what if about the human body, and then everyone was just like, oh dear God, like that is a nightmare. I was like, oh, I guess under certain circumstances it could be. So it's just like the whole thing wound up moving in this more sort of bio horror direction simply because of other people's reaction to it. So right now I'm sort of like thinking about like, ooh, it's just like it's a snarling, vicious, like it is beyond Cronenbergian. It's getting into like Cthulhu Kit, like territory, Lovecraft, and it's just goofy guy. It's a goofy guy who's drooling a little bit. I'm like, there's nothing scary about this guy.
I
Um,
agree.
it's a little guy.
I love it when it's a little guy. And I think that's the tricky thing about aliens in general is like when you get into mutants that are so far away from people, they kind of veer back around into cute little animals. Like I feel like once
It's new
they
best friends.
veer too far away, you're like, oh, hey, this could actually be an interesting organism outside of that. So yeah, it's a weird thing. I think people inherently like you want a little bit of that um sapientness or a little bit of that, I don't know if that's the right term, but a little bit of that close to homeness to get that uncanny valley. I think that makes spookier monsters if they're a little closer to home.
Yeah, the uncanny effect
Nice.
is super important, because if it hits that sort of like writing very close to something that is almost a person, it's like if it's a monster, you're like, oh god, a monster. Well, I could, if it's a game, it's like I can kill this, or like I can talk to it, or if it's even a little bit, it's like, oh, new best friend. But like if it's a little bit of a person, then you're like, and in thinking about just like shape language for stuff, like, it's a very sort of classic illustration kind of trope where if you're doing jagged lines, those will naturally, it's like Kiki Boba stuff for like how your brain interprets things.
Yeah.
Like if we look at spiky things, we're like, don't touch the spiky thing. That's just how our brains work. So like if you do the spiky thing, like suddenly it's like it adds a level of like monsteriness or viciousness to it. Or if it's like beyond round to like goopy, you're like, I don't want to touch the goopy thing. I don't want to get cut in resin. So it's like you start thinking about unpleasant sensations and how they translate into lines, and you can start doing a little bit more. I can't really draw teeth without looking like they're like, "Hang!" So that's something I got to work on. I built an alien xenomorph costume, and it just looks like he's just a pal. Like, hey.
That is something I wanted to ask, actually. Like, as you are getting, like, as you're drawing, do you have intentional things that you're trying to improve right now? Like, is there something that you're in particular, like, this is something that I wish I could do better or quicker? Like, what are some of the things that you're aiming towards, I suppose?
So for me, sort of like this kind of stuff, just doing this over and over and over again helps a lot. Because like this is a shape, like like intellectually I know how to draw it, but like I don't make lines that look like that very often. So like even just this sort of exercise of making these shapes helps. Or like doing, if it were more of like a real exercise, I would try and do something that is like, a little bit challenging to like draw like a shape like that, where it's like, I don't know how to draw that. I've never drawn it before. So then I would do like a dozen of these just to get it. It's like the easiest way to do like lyrical stuff is to just practice this endlessly.
Yeah.
That doesn't lend itself to horror. So like horror needs its own kind of like, it needs a different kind of language. And the language needs to be made more of like fear and mess and unpleasant things.
Yeah. Something that it's weird because I've been watching these draw streams, and I've also been just kind of playing with different, because like I've been playing the games, so sometimes I draw things for my own games. And when I'm looking at the styles of the different artists you have on Stillfleet, I think you've made my drawings more squiggly. Like when I draw Stillfleet stuff, it becomes squigglier because you have such a loose kind of style for drawing. And so I'm like, oh yeah, that's how you can build volume really quickly. If you just keep your hand really loose, you build up the shape. It's almost like woodworking or like building something out of ceramics. Like you're very loose about building up your drawing.
Thank you. Yeah, the irony being that like I wound up with like a really bad occupational injury over the past couple months that I needed to go to physical therapy. And it's not because of like, oh, I came up with this like, it's the same as you were talking about, I think, with Mesoamerican art, where it's like it all goes into the pot. And so like for me, I didn't consciously set out to make something that was faster. It was sort of like my hypergraphia demands that I draw all the time. So I came up with something that like describes volume but can be laid down quickly. Unfortunately, I guess if you do it all the time without a break, then you wind up injuring your arm. So,
or summoning a demon, right? I mean,
or summoning a demon, yeah. Or both these things have do. But like, so these days I'm like, right now I'm just drawing very fast because I'm like on a stream. I'm like, oh, I've got to impress. I've got to draw fast because we're on a stream. But like, I don't know, like I really appreciate like Tony and Chris's like more thoughtful approach to drawing, where they are sort of splitting the difference between volumetric sculptural drawing and like schematic, and like a sketch. So I feel like they are also very efficient in the way that they draw in a different way. And I'm trying to like sort of like as I like have sort of been under the art direction of Chris for the Dance Macabre games, and also like co-worked with Tony a lot now. I feel like that's something that's getting a little bit under my skin. So it's like, if I were to now say like, let's come up with a body horror character, like right now, let's just like do it. Just like, I guess it would be like starting process wise with like an idea. Is it a pumpkin guy? Is it a,
yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. One is like drawing in the same style for a game, which is like weird because it's like we want you to draw like you, but also like the game has to look unified, you know? And so I think that's an interesting question of like, how do we do that? And like Taylor, I know we've been working with you explicitly in terms of illustrations for Danse Macabre, but I think that's one reason it'd be interesting to get you in this chat, in this live drawing environment, is to see how do two artists kind of work together to say, okay, the specific decisions we're going to make, right, are like,
Yeah.
the teeth will look like this, or the line work will be squiggly or not squiggly or whatever, right? And so I think that'd be interesting to kind of do this. We may just have to do it again if technical difficulties.
Yeah, we'll just do a
Yeah.
round two.
thwart
Yeah,
us.
we'll do a round two once we figure out some stuff. But have you ever played like Exquisite Corpse? Have you ever played that game?
Oh yeah, and we had a I think that this was just like a one that my friends came up with. Like we played a version of it called Righty Dry, where you draw something and then it's folded over and then somebody writes a description of it and then the new drawing reflects that description, and it's like
Yeah.
a combo writing drawing telephone game.
I think that could be fun for like a horror ideation where we maybe use vague words and kind of do something righty dry. But yeah, no, I think for me, my process is really kind of like I do a lot of like research and image looking before I start any drawing. Like I'll like loosely do a bajillion thumbnails and then I'll look at 800 pictures of a chimpanzee and then I'm like, okay, now I
It's in
can
my-
draw. But yeah, I very much like I love to look at reference photos. I love to kind of pull from a lot of different things, and I think about it as like a chili pot. Like I put a bunch of different ingredients into it. And so for me, one thing that I really love about tabletop games is because it is usually group ideation, like you're playing with other people, they're telling their stories, they're describing their characters. Like Sarah the other day described her Danse Macabre character as Richard Kind, but with like two heads, and things like that. Like I would never think to draw Richard Kind with two heads, but I think that's the coolest thing ever. So yeah, I think when you play tabletop games, you get to share your theater of the mind with other people, and that usually makes for some really rich and cool and fun things. So
I love that, and there's an Exquisite Corpse there of like, you say, oh, I look like X, and your friend can be like, oh, do you also have Y attribute, right? Are you holding a giant X? The most recent character I played was at a friend's house. We were doing a playtest group, and I played for a game called Beverage Goblins, which is fun and people should check out. I played a goblin who I described as Meg Ryan from Working Girl, but a goblin, so like a girl boss goblin. And I think that was fun for everyone to be like, I kind of know exactly what you mean, but also like, what the hell does that mean? Like, you're a 2 foot tall, green, large-eared like monster with sharp teeth who lives in the swamp, but also somehow you're an entrepreneur who like runs a startup for ferrying like bags of shit around the swamp. I don't know. So it was fun to kind of group build like these characters very rapidly with like no planning. This is like a 1 hour, like extra game. So I think that's fun.
Live, laugh, love for a goblin.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ethan, I will say, in terms of group building, what are we working on now, and how?
So,
maybe if you want to ask Taylor
beautiful
for
blobs.
direction or
Beautiful
something,
blobs.
since we can't interact in the same magma space, but
like you, I look a lot at images. I sort of very obsessively collect and index images. It just seems to be a thing that relaxes me. And I've always sort of like had the excuse of like, oh, I always will find use for these things for like reference. But it's like, at this point, the in quotes database of it has far outstripped like the need for like 1 or 2 human lifetimes. It's just sort of like, okay, well this seems a little, okay, well I did this. And then like Google's image search turned to shit, and like all this AI crap started poisoning Pinterest, and I'm like, wow, I am so glad I did that. Now I don't have to go on the internet anymore because the internet sucks.
I go to the library.
The library is the way to go.
You just made your own internet, or you use the public internet, i.e. the library.
With blackjack. With
Google,
blackjack and hookers.
Google has let me down too much. I go to the library a lot more now.
Yeah. So like I will do the same thing where I'll pour over images. I try and like as an exercise be like, okay, I don't even know what X, Y, and Z looks at. And often it's very sort of humbling to realize when you have an idea of something like, I actually don't know how to draw like a wheelbarrow or a chimney or a particular kind of paw. And I've seen so many images of it. It's like, I've never actually bothered practicing drawing it. And my brain only thinks it knows how to draw that thing. So like doing a bunch of iterations of just like bad, wrong stuff out of memory is often really funny. And then you go to the thing and you're like, oh, I sort of started practicing a little bit. Like I sort of segued into practicing, so it's a little less painful. But like something like this, it's like I had this idea of like, oh, is it like does it have a flame head, or is it melty? Is it like lava? Is it acid? So like trying to think of like something pointy, something a little flamey, and something drippy, like the Holy Trinity. So it's like in just sort of practicing it over and over again, like this could just be an infinite, this could just be its own art project. But like in terms of making a guy, it's sort of like the things that like, okay, what is the most chilling, like reacting to shapes is always so weird because they're just shapes. But it's like, which one of these makes me feel the wrongest? And it's like, or which is the most, like, this is like, this feels like something because it's drippy. And like, this feels like a lick of flame. And then like, this feels like he's sort of, oh, is he crying? Is something dripping sad? If he's like a sad boy, that's sort of like, that's very evocative, like horrors about moroseness and sorrow and all this other stuff. It's way scarier. Like sadness is way scarier than aggression oftentimes. So it's like, okay, so it's like, it's dripping, but it's forming a channel, and it's really drippy on the bottom, but that's a nice, so then like taking the things that I like and then being like choosing from a menu to kind of like maybe think about like, because I don't know what this guy is. It's like, I want a dripping flame. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's a helmet of some kind. So like, okay, if it's a helmet, then he's got the eye slit, but that looks really aggressive and neutral. So if he's like crying from it, like that's really gross and interesting because it's not, he's bleeding from it. But then like if the shape of the eyes looks a little mournful or something, and then it's sort of like, all right, this is starting to turn into like an emotion, even though it's just like a shape. So it's like, or maybe I'll try something a little bit different, like the flamey flame head. And then, you know, the bottom of it is like a recognizable chin or something. And then there's like the dripping coming off of it. So just sort of like taking these ideas, this abstraction, and start turning it into like ideas, like a little idea factory.
But so, sorry, Ethan, if you had to put a label on it, what are these guys we're looking at?
So like I was just trying to think about like mixing up some of these ideas of like drippiness and spikiness and flaminess, things that could be like a little bit horror or like, you know, dark related. And then I just sort of changed shapes of like outside, inside, like flame, kind of a face area, or like a drippy thing. So it's like, what is that? Like that's like acid or ichor or tears or slime or flames. And then sort of trying to create
like composition and
materials, and sort of out of that, like, okay, because I didn't have an idea at all in mind, sort of thinking about like, okay, if it's like a weeping shape, that's sort of off-putting. It's like, you know, and it's like, that's sort of nothing. But then if it has a neck and a diadem, you know, suddenly it's like, it's a weeping wimple. It's like, okay, this is starting to look like a person that I would not want to encounter in a dark castle, or like
the weeping wimple.
The weeping wimple. It's an item.
So when you're doing like, because I do scribblies like this too. Like I'll do a bunch of scribbles. It's like cloud watching. You kind of do a bunch of scribbles and then you kind of build a shape into it. When you're doing that, how much are you thinking about like the composition of what you're doing? Because oftentimes I'll do a bunch of them and they'll get like more dynamic as I go. So like the first ones I do are just like, that's basically a circle. And then by the end of it, I think I tend to be making shapes that are more interesting to look at. And so I do it also to just kind of loosen up before I draw anything.
Totally. And it's like, because I also do, you know, I do fine art and abstract art. Like I do drawing art separate from illustration oftentimes. And I found that keeping them a little bit separate, and I'm trying to honestly connect them more these days, it was sort of like the exercise for one that's an abstraction can be really helpful for shape language for illustration. And the technique and experience of illustration can wind up being really helpful for like just making a decision on a piece of like abstract art. So like I could do this like forever. I worked in grad school with Alicia DeSantis, who was one of the visual editors for the New York Times, and like was like ran basically shapes, just like ran us. So it's just all shapes, just all the time. It was just like infinite. Like she would basically give us an idea or have us come up with an idea and then like run drills on it. And it's like, until you hit bedrock of like, I am out of ideas. And she's like, that's sort of like when, if you're trying to push the dial forward on an idea, you're finally forced to come up with stuff you've never come up with before. Cause you're like, I don't know. I'm so sick of drawing these two eyeballs on a face. Oh, right. Human faces are all different. Got it. Get what you were saying. I understand now. I would say that it honestly takes a while for me before I start feeling like, okay, I'm starting to waste my time a little bit by coming up with infinite shapes. It's time to make a decision. And then I kind of feel like I have got to then go back over them and be like, oh, I like this, oh, I like that, oh, I like that. Because given the opportunity, I'll just do that forever. Just forevermore.
I would say like yours and Chris's style are different. Are there things when you're working for Dance Macabre, are there things that you are trying to emulate in Chris's style? Like, are there things that you've identified that you're like, okay,
Yeah,
I want to take from that or match that so that we have kind of a similarity between the works?
Yeah, like my stuff winds up being very textural, and so I think in the interest of keeping like the book sort of like copacetic and making it all sort of read, the thing I'm trying to emulate the most from him and I actually really admire about his art is among many other things is like the fact that like, you know, shapes are very clearly delineated. It's like even if something is flat, it never feels flat, because he's taken the time to like fill in, you know, if he'll organize like a shape, and this is very much like about medieval art too, like if something is a blah blah blah, like a random shape, each of those areas will then be apportioned the texture necessary to get the job done. So the thing that I'm trying to emulate is like if I've got lots of mess, I'm trying to keep the mess limited to the line work that makes the shape clear. So it's like if it's like a chaotic, like abandoned abbey with tons of weird textures and stuff, it's like, well, that'll be like limited to the hill, and it'll be like limited to like the tower, and then another tower will be textural, but it's separate. So like starting to really think about shape language and like encapsulating almost like texture inside different shapes. And I feel like that sells the connection, because that's like very much like a more stylized form of line, and it like, truth be told, it cleans up things a lot. It makes it a lot easier to read. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that all right, I should maybe do that more often in general.
Yeah, I mean they're what they're doing is pretty neat because their line art is pretty clean, and then they're using a lot of shaders to add a lot more texture. And so I feel like, you know, the line art tends to be on the cleaner side versus on your art. I feel like I see a lot more texture done by squiggles, texture done by actual hatching and like making marks. And so I'm curious to see when the book comes out, how the two differ. Like I'm kind of, I like to do this when I look at art books. I like to kind of see like, oh, how does this style change over time? Because usually, you know, you've drawn 200 pages, so your art changes by the end of the book. And so I think it'll be really neat to see what collaborators kind of added different things to it.
I'm also excited because this is different than how we did Stillfleet or Blister Critters, because Stillfleet was much more about Ethan's art, showcasing Ethan's art, and then all of the non-Ethan stuff was like, yeah, just do your own thing. Like Ethan and I gave art direction, but it wasn't really, we weren't saying emulate Ethan. And then Blister Critters was all Tony, and we were supporting that. But for this game, it's like a group activity where, yes, it's Chris's game. Chris is doing a lot of the art, especially in the rule book, but it really is three artists working together to forge a style, you know. And then graphically, you know, Tony and Gay are kind of bounding it in a book or a series of 4 books. So it's kind of like, you know, how does that work? Like, I don't know. We haven't done it before. So Ethan, it's sort of an interesting experiment in that sense, you know.
Yeah. I
hadn't even thought of the things you guys are saying. Sorry, it was just about the roundness and shading and all that. Like, it makes sense. So anyway, it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a lot of different ways to make like something look like something, which is the most silly statement ever, I think. But like there's a lot of different techniques that you can get to add texture to an artwork. And I think it's cool in illustration, especially digital illustration. All of that is like fake, right? It's all like trick of the eye things. And so it's kind of neat to see how different artists are approaching it. And like, yeah, it's cool. I think the artists that you have are really good at that. So having varied styles and black shading and different kinds of ways of working. So do you like working in black and white?
I had started doing black and white art as an exercise, like in just sort of simplifying stuff, last year. And it's like, it's a separate kind of body of art that I've just been tooling with just to get more familiar with it. And I've actually I started really liking it a lot. So when Dance Macabre work started, I felt like, cool, I'm actually more comfortable with this than I was even last year. Yeah, it's really clarifying because you really have to rely on design language. Like things have to be behind other things like shading and like where you put the light or don't, like how you organize stuff. Like organization suddenly becomes really important for making it clearer, which honestly has been a great exercise, and I'm hoping like over time will also improve my like non-black and white art.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of the cartoonist, but I was listening to a cartoonist once, and his advice about art was basically like, if it doesn't look good in black and white, color's not going to fix it. And so I always think about that. Like, if you have a strong black and white illustration, the addition of color is just sort of like the cherry on top. Like, it's a benefit to it. But if you jump to color too early, if your base sketch isn't ready yet, then it can really become a color soup really quick. And so I think it's fun to do black and white art. I think it's a good practice, if nothing else. But
Yeah, it's interesting how those choices, even in this case, we actually do have another color, but we're not, the artists are not allowed to use it. It's really for graphic design, so it's kind of like it's a black
The
and white
forbidden
drawing
orange.
still.
Yeah.
the
So
forbidden orange.
it's OSR adjacent, right? It's a black and white style because it's old
Sure.
school, whatever that means. But also then we do have orange, so it's like in a way. I don't know if that factors in. I guess a question for both of you, like when you're drawing something, but also you're going to hand it off and it's going to be positioned and styled within a larger kind of page. Even if it's a key hero art piece on a page. So let's say it takes up the whole page, it still might have like an orange border added. And so, we're trying to keep it in that medieval where like there is a tradition obviously of annotatio, which really drives the whole sometimes kingdom world of like everything is marginal. But for DM, it's for Danse Macabre, it's more like hero pieces with borders, and the borders are ornamental and medieval. They're all referencing real medieval stuff. So I don't know if that changes anything, or it's like, nah, just draw what I draw and like pass it off. But it is like another level, like you're saying. It's like it's not just it's a shared style. It's not just black and white. It's also like in conversation, I guess, with this like orange borders, basically.
Mm-hmm. I think compositionally, I think about that. It's tricky because, yeah, if you're working, I've never worked on a book of like that size. I've worked on like a couple zines, but I think it's tricky because if you're working on a book that is collaborative, that's going to have a lot of text, you're going to be thinking about layout, you're going to be thinking about where this is going to be positioned, it's going to change your composition. Oftentimes in tabletop games, like the art is, I think you described it as like a cookbook at one point. It's instructional art, right? Like a jumping off point. And so because of that, like you maybe don't want to get too precious with it. Like you want to maybe give space for people to imagine things. You want to make sure that it doesn't have too much detail. That's like one of my biggest problems is that I love to add detail to things. And when it's going to be printed on a piece of paper, most of that detail is going to get lost. So you have to cut back on the amount of detail you put into a drawing in order to make sure that it translates well to a page, which is fun, but also like sometimes you get lost in the sauce and you want to play and you want to make
you get
cool.
lost in the sauce.
Yeah, you want to
100%.
play. So yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of being like, okay, how do I best convey this cleanly as possible? Because too much visual information on a page is not helping anybody.
Yeah, that's been the biggest challenge for me, like art-wise, coming from fine art into game illustrative art, is sort of like finding enough ambiguity that it feels like play and it feels alive, versus like it really does in a lot of ways have to be schematic because it is a game that has to have this real serious utilitarian value to it. And it honestly took me it took me the first Stillfleet book before I really sort of like kind of wrapped my head around it. And now it's sort of like, okay, I think I can circle the square most of the time because the sketch can always be made more clear. But like oftentimes that verve is lost in the translation. So that's the real art challenge of like making something clear while retaining the energy from the sketch. That's the sauce right there that I don't ever want to lose. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same with writing. It's like you can write really beautiful sentences that would be great in a novel, but it's not a novel, right? It's more a cookbook.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost Ethan's art. But yeah, so I think that's a challenge at the level of even design too. You can add epicyclic rules that are like interesting from a game design standpoint, but they're not actually that fun. And I think that's a lot of, to me, what playtesting is having the core straightened out, but then you start adding extra bits because people have, whoa, what about this? Does a halberd let me push someone back? And you're like, sure, yeah, we'll make a whole pushback and then you're like, wait, no, we don't want that. Like, this is too much.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
just say, no, it just does extra damage, or like it has a very simple, gives you advantage on grapple or something, right? So it's kind of one of those like, you just kind of roll with that process. And I think it's interesting to hear how you would do that with art and how we'd iterate. So maybe Taylor, we can invite you to do that with some DM stuff if you want, like even just a character or something you would sketch just for fun, like during a game, and sort of see how, how does an artist bring it into a style, and how do we decide, okay, this is enough visual information but not too much for conveying this character, a quarter page, or for A5 more like half page, size, right? So we have just a few minutes left. Ethan, I think we lost you to internet your screen real briefly, but if you want to reshare.
Yeah, I had a power outage.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's hold on a
Today's the
second.
day for technical issues.
It really
just
is,
been cursed. Let me try
like
sharing
cyber
a screen.
attack or
Yeah. We were trying to pick up some costume shit at Marshall's, and then walking across the street came out, and the car dealership across the street was just fully on fire. And we're just like, well, I guess we're not finding any cool clothing today.
No. Oh.
Just like, well, that's just beyond doomed.
Okay. So I see a sort of a lordly figure here. What are we looking at?
So what exactly are we looking at here? This is I don't think this is in the Danse Macabre universe. This is trying to like sort of capture a dark fantasy vibe. I would want to turn this helm into like a helmet that somebody has to wear, or like there is a Maleficia that like requires containment of your head, because otherwise it like sloshes out,
pours out.
Like just like a cursed weeping. Like the helmet is actually helpful, because otherwise your head is ichor and it just drains out of you. Horrifying. So I like this is the thing that goes through my head when I do horror. It's all psychological. Like,
yeah.
So I chose the diamond, like honestly, the first shape from the sort of like play. And then I'm like, well, a diamond needs some kind of cap on top of it because it's a very royal kind of shape. So I put this really sort of brambly, if this were like Blasphemous or some kind of dark fantasy game in a different world, I'd put like a really on the nose thing, like a crown of thorns or something on it, or a halo.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the weeping thing was trying to sort of take advantage of the diamond and like all the drippiness and like the weeping part. So it's like a helmet, and then wherever the eye is, like that portal is just like it's sobbing or it's dripping. It's something like that. So it's coming down the body. And it's got a very tall neck, just because that also reads a sort of like, is it a lord or is it a lady? And that's sort of the gender ambiguity sweet spot that I try and aim for. To try and counterpose it like the same shape as over again with these like weird spiky things, like the pauldron or.
Ooh. We lost Ethan again.
We might have lost Ethan again. Okay, so I think we're being attacked by Russia or China or whatever again. I don't know why. We're trying to defect to China.
Unbelievable!
So
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Seriously.
We just can't see you.
Okay, great. Well, let's do this.
Or the art.
It's one more. I wonder if we've got so many bells and whistles attached to each other that like
that
it's given up the ghost.
No, I don't.
Right. Anyway,
I think it's one web app. So we're gonna wrap up. So let's do some final thoughts, and then Taylor, we'll just have to try this again when you can get some tech stuff working.
Yeah.
And Ethan, maybe that time let's pick ahead of time some specific Danse Macabre imagery to draw.
I like it.
So today we did sort of general exploration to wrap up of kind of form and how do you start to compose interesting ideas, and starting kind of de novo, right? Is that fair to say? You're starting from nothing.
Absolutely.
You're saying, let me do a sort of dark fantasy sketch, and how weird can I get it, and how do I do body horror and give shape? And so you're showing some uses of line and some of your process. And Taylor was asking some good questions around, working with other artists and thinking about, black and white versus usually you have color, different palettes and such. So that's kind of a little recap. But, final thoughts, Ethan, Taylor?
Yeah, that's all good. Well, it's just straight up stopped working, so I'm assuming this is.
Okay, well, I'll share my
Great.
final
well,
thoughts,
on that
I
note,
suppose. Yeah, no, it was really excellent to talk with you both today. I would love to come back on and do some actual drawing. Woohoo! So that would be exciting. And then as far as Dance Macabre, I think it's a really cool game. I'm excited for it, and I think it'll be really cool to see what all of the artists and writers do together in the same room. I think that's really cool because so far they've been pretty excellent games. So
Well,
teamwork.
thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. And Taylor, if you
Mhm.
want to get involved more, we can definitely talk offline about that. That's just, again, a question of
Yeah.
scope and what needs doing, right? So that's a question for Chris and also Ethan and Tony. But yeah, Taylor, really appreciate you. For everyone who didn't get a chance to see because you haven't been on our server playing games with Taylor, the art is just amazing. So Taylor, we want to show off your stuff. So we'll definitely have you back on, and we'll do that. And Ethan, as always, really appreciate you and your speedy hand and interesting ideas. So thanks for doing some sketching. Anything, Ethan, you wanted to add if you don't cut out immediately? Otherwise, I'm going to close the stream.
Just for the love of God. Yeah, I think the art is really, even with something like dark horror or fantasy, it is really ultimately just like, it doesn't exist. It's shapes on paper. So it's like the difficulty of like feeling, like trying to find out how shapes make you feel is like the crux of the work, and then just keep like iterating and drilling down to that with like studying the fundamentals of just like design and like shape composition. I feel like is the road to go. It's all about feelings and shapes and feelings.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. It's all about shapes and feelings. Shapes and feelings could be a follow-up to lasers and feelings that's somehow drawing based. So we could do that as a one-page game.
Yeah.
Giving ourselves more homework. Yeah. Thanks again, Taylor, Ethan, Taylor Z, Ethan Gouldini. And you can find Ethan usually at Spectral House or at Ethan Gouldini. And Ethan, you're very active on Instagram, so everyone should check out. It's Spectral House, right, for Instagram, at Spectral House.
That's the one.
Cool. And Taylor is on our Discord, so if you want to play games with Taylor, you can head over to discord.stillfleet.com. And if you're interested in Dance Macabre, you can go to stillfleet.com/DANSE, Dance, or just go on Kickstarter or Google and look up Dance Macabre. It'll pop up. And really appreciate everybody tuning in and asking questions if you have them in the future. We do this every couple weeks. So Taylor, if you want to come back in a couple weeks, we'll just sync schedule calendars again and do a little tech check beforehand.
Yeah.
We'll figure out how Magma works. I'll ask Tony.
It worked 2 days ago. I don't know why.
It works in the very recent past. Yeah, we've used it
Weeping Night King. No. Sad.
I like your Weeping Night King. He's
I
really
like
cool.
the Weeping Night King too. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, guys, and I'll catch y'all around on the internet
All right.
and in real life. Bye bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.